Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Fractional Futures, where in each episode I'm speaking to fractional leaders across the globe. My purpose is to get their perspectives on how the fractional leadership model has been embraced by the business landscape. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Marc Fletcher, who is founder of Hedley Sydney, which provides fractional CMO services, strategic marketing, and project-based marketing services to B2B businesses in South Africa. Hi, Marc. Welcome to the show.
Paul, nice to meet you.
That's a proper bona fide South African accent there. How's Cape Town? You must be approaching summer now.
Yeah, it's actually spring, but the spring this year is being crazy. I mean, I think last Monday we had 30 degrees, and then the following day it went back down to like 19 degrees again. So we're still struggling to kind of get over the edge of summer, but yeah, we should be there on its way soon, which means that I guess you're kind of going into your autumn, so it's cooling down for you guys.
It is. It's today's actually quite a sunny day, but I know in Europe we're sort of blighted with major floods everywhere. Anyway,
Absolutely.
enough about the weather because us Brits are obsessed by it. So before we jump in, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background before you got into the fractional space?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. So interestingly enough, I'm actually a born and bred Londoner. So I moved here in 2001. Well, I came here on holiday in 2001 and just never left. And then as a result of that, never leaving, I thought, okay, I'm going to stay here. I set up a software development business and a digital agency. This was in 2001. And then I ran that for a good few years. I think about 2008, I then sold it to a corporate, which was T Systems. So that was the start of my my corporate track in a sense. So started off well being an entrepreneur, running my own business. Ended up at T Systems in a corporate, and I was there for 4 years. And then after that, I decided to get out of corporate again, and I wanted to go back to being in a small business. And I joined a firm called Carabiner. And within 6 months of being at Carabiner, it was then acquired by another large corporate called Ultron. So I found myself back in a corporate again. And I then obviously stayed in Ultron for about 7 years, moving between sort of sales and marketing roles. I've always found, to improve my marketing, it's always good to sort of take sales roles as well. So you can really understand, what the customer's saying about your products and services. So I kind of moved between those two roles. So by that stage, I had about sort of 16 years of sort of marketing and sales experience. And then earlier this year, in around about May, following the merger of some of the businesses within the Ultron group, I had the opportunity to then jump out and start my own business again. And that's when I decided I was then going to sort of go into fractional consulting.
Fantastic. And I like what you said there about CMOs wanting to go into the sales space for a bit and really cutting their teeth with, the coalface and the customer. And I think, from my perspective, I think there's many CMOs that haven't necessarily had that strong sales background. So, and I think that's where you're seeing some of these new CRO roles coming through, where perhaps the CMOs aren't quite delivering on the sales piece. But no, I totally get you on that. So Marc, really interesting background there. How did you go from your entrepreneurial background to corporate to fractional? Can you explain your journey there?
Yeah, for sure. So when I left Ultron, I figured I was just going to go consulting. Take my sort of marketing skills, set up my marketing consultancy business, and I started to sort of research, the field around sort of consulting and the marketing consulting in South Africa and globally as well. And this concept of fractional came up. So I started sort of Googling more around sort of fractional sort of CXO roles. And then I posted on LinkedIn that I was going to start a business and become a fractional CMO. And somebody said to me, oh, okay, you must go chat to this guy. He's in Cape Town also. And he's a fractional CEO. I had a couple of sessions with him, and he kind of like gave a bit more insight around how the fractional model works, at least here in South Africa. And I thought, yeah, that sounds actually like a great fit. And that kind of is more aligned to what I want to do. And so therefore, I kind of positioned myself as a fractional CMO and started having conversations with potential clients around what that included. And there was my business born around being a fractional CMO.
And what part of this work style really appealed to you? Was it more the work style pattern where you can pick and choose your clients? Was it more time doing things you enjoy, picking different sectors?
Yeah, I think, Paul, it's a number of different things, to be honest. I guess I kind of get bored quite easily. So, I quite like the kind of the constant change of being a fractional CMO, working with different clients. I like solving problems. And so, the ability to sort of identify a potential client, have that conversation with them, work out that, first of all, the culture is a good fit for both you and the client. The problem is something which is within your ballpark that you can solve. And being confident enough to say, I'll come into your business, I'll help you solve that problem, and I'll help you grow your business as a result as well. And that really kind of appealed to me. And also choosing your own hours, not being sort of a slave to 9 to 5. I quite enjoy surfing and running in the mountain here in Cape Town. So being able to sort of choose my own hours and be flexible was also another bonus to going the fractional route.
Oh, great stuff. And I know, plenty of fractionals that I've spoken to all over the world. Similar kind of story there, where it's mixing business with pleasure, really, and this work style gives you more, I guess, opportunity to really use your time how you want, and you're only accountable to yourself. So that's great. And so as you transitioned into this portfolio career, what particular challenges did you have to overcome to make it happen?
And this was the curious thing, is that it wasn't actually challenging for me. It was actually remarkably easy. Everything just kind of flowed for me. And I think that's because I'd worked in my entire career was consulting in a sense. I worked in sales and of course worked in marketing. I worked in small businesses, so I was used to the hustle of small business and sort of knew what to expect, which is very different. I think if you're coming fresh out of a corporate and you've been a corporate for like 30 odd years or whatever, how long you've been there, you haven't really experienced that sort of entrepreneurial lifestyle. I also wasn't under, financial pressure to sort of take the first opportunity, which meant I could actually go and choose my clients. So I was very clear about sort of defining my ideal customer profile, making sure that was solid and sticking to that really, because I had a lot of opportunities come through where it was kind of outside of my ICP. And I thought, well, I could do it, but, am I really sort of selling myself short? Because it's not really where I want to be. So for me, it was that move from being an entrepreneur of old and working in small business, understanding what that took, and being able to then sort of just mold that into my lifestyle. So it wasn't too challenging. I think the challenges occur is when you get excited about delivering on a project and you end up over delivering, and then you forget that whilst you're delivering, you still need to be selling, marketing, and running your business at the same time. So you almost need to have those many hats that you wear. You're suddenly the chief sales officer, the chief marketing officer, the chief executive officer, the chief financial officer, and you've got a bunch of other things, activities that you need to kind of squeeze into your week or your day. And I guess that balance is something which I'm still working out at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that it takes time to find that healthy balance. I guess with VCMO and what I'm doing, I treat VCMO as a client because it's very easy to lose sight of your own business. Yes, you're focusing on clients; they're paying you the revenue, but you can't forget your own business. And I really do treat it like it's a client. So Mark, in terms of South Africa, how has the fractional model been embraced? Is it kind of a new thing in South Africa? Are there any particular regions picking up on it more than others? How's it been embraced?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. And when I initially did my research, I realized that the whole concept of fractionals was very big in the US. I think it's maybe not as big in the UK, but it's definitely growing in the UK from my research that I did. And here in South Africa, it's almost a bit of an unknown entity. So when I go out and I engage clients or CXOs in these clients, I'm almost educating them around the difference between what a fractional is and what a consultant is and what an interim executive is. But that's also kind of quite exciting for me as well, because I'm at the very beginning of the fractional boom here, I think, in South Africa. I've actually met a number of fractionals through this journey. There's some fractional CMOs, some fractional CEOs, and some fractional CIOs. And it's actually been very interesting because I'm meeting these people, and they're not necessarily fractionals at the beginning of the conversation. They're consultants or they're interims. And as I start talking about the concept of fractional, they're like, actually, well, yeah, maybe I'm also a fractional. So it's almost a case of, It doesn't really matter to some degree what you call yourself. It's more about articulating the value that you bring and the difference that you are between some of the other sort of roles that are out there in the industry, especially interims, I guess, or consultants. So, fractional seems to be, the sort of the cool word or the buzzword right now, but it does seem to kind of articulate, what we're trying to achieve as a community of sort of CMOs in my case and CXOs.
So that's interesting you say that, because a lot of people are confusing the different roles. Certainly in the UK, a lot of people in the business landscape, they just see the fractional X, whether it's a CMO or CFO, just as another buzzword. It's just a jazzed up consultant. So when you're explaining the differences and the subtleties between these different types of roles, what's the light bulb moment that goes off in someone's mind where they say, actually, I'm not a consultant, maybe I am a fractional? What is that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Paul. And I keep it very simple. I mean, for me, a consultant is somebody that is outside of your business that helps define strategy for you and then gives you that strategy and then walks out the door. And the way I explain a fractional is that a fractional CXO, and in my case, a fractional CMO, within your business, they're embedded within your business. They're sitting with your leadership team. They create your strategy, your marketing strategy based on your business strategy, and they give input to your business strategy as well. And then, of course, they help you implement that strategy that you've come up with as well. And so it's more of a sort of an internal role, but an external consulting role. And I think that also helps as well because, you need to be embedded, I feel, especially as a fractional CMO, you need to be embedded into the business to really understand, the business strategy and also the people, the processes, and the customers from within inside.
And so I guess that leads me on to an interesting question in terms of the advice you would give a CEO who's considering introducing a fractional CMO into their business. What would you do to describe this role? Because a lot of CEOs would naturally, the natural tendency would be, I have a marketing capability gap. The obvious answer is go to a recruitment company and find someone through the traditional route. But now you've got this new choice, this new sort of paradigm in leadership. What advice would you give a CEO who's kind of on the edge of deciding, should I take a plunge and go with a fractional leader, or should I just do the old-fashioned route? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I actually had that scenario recently with a client. And I think that the key thing I try and achieve, first of all, is explain to them the difference between, first of all, the different sort of consulting type roles. So either a fractional, an interim, or a consultant. And then, of course, playing that back to them in terms of the difference between having a consultant, whether it's one of those, or having an internal resource that you might hire as well. And making sure they understand the difference between all of those and the benefits that come with each of those roles as well. And then trying to sort of work out what is the ideal role that they need for where they are in their business growth or their strategy, and guiding them through that process. The worst thing you want to do is convince them that they need a fractional CMO, for example, and then 3 months down the line, they're kind of saying, well, actually, can you work full time for me? Because again, most of us fractionals don't want to work full time. So I think it's sometimes critical to make sure they understand that they understand what they actually want. And sometimes they don't know what they want. So it's that coaching process to kind of help them understand the different roles in the landscape, the work that they need doing, and then guiding them towards, whatever role they might need for their position in the business or their need at that time. So the client I had recently, they came to me and they had a need for, they hadn't had marketing for a long while, and they decided they needed a CMO to come and join them. I engaged them. I explained to them what fractional CMO was all about. And through our discussions, I think we both came to the conclusion, actually, that they actually needed to hire a marketing person within the business who would then lead that on a sort of a 1 or 2 year trajectory. And they didn't necessarily want that sort of part-time, sort of mainly sort of strategic focus. They wanted somebody who could actually do a whole plethora of different activities within the business.
That's That's an interesting point, because it's not just educating the business landscape on the concept of this fractional leadership model. I think certainly in the marketing discipline, there's a lot of business leaders need educated on what marketing is in the first place, and really what type of marketing they need. Is it strategic marketing? Is it tactical marketing? Is it a blend of the two? So I think that's another conversation I'm certainly having. It's one of the first things I speak to clients about is, what is your understanding of marketing? And invariably, the first thing that comes back is it's the promotional part of the marketing mix, which is we need more advertising, we need more stuff to raise awareness and profile. And when I sort of explain the strategic value of marketing, and it's actually about value creation, it's about creating enterprise value, it's about creating a competitive advantage, the penny kind of drops very quickly, and it's like, I thought you marketers just were the colouring in team, and you just did a bit of advertising. It's like, no, it's a little bit more than that. So I think there's two levels of education that the landscape still needs. And I still think in 20 years' time, you'll still be explained to the market what marketing is. But hopefully with some good fractional leaders, they'll explain that for us.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Paul, because literally, through the last few years, I've worked with CEOs and MDs. But initially, as I came into the business, their view of marketing, as you say, was balloons and brochures. That was the adage, which I obviously had to sort of try and overcome. That promotional layer, as you say. And then I was chatting to a CSO the other day, and his CEO used the adage of, what was it now? Literally, sort of the analogy you made of sort of colouring in, arts and crafts, I think he called it. So again, marketing has to sort of go some way towards demystifying what marketing actually does. They kind of think it's just about sort of turning up at an event and handing somebody a brochure. And there's a lot more involved than that. And I think that's also part of the work I'm doing at the moment when I'm engaging my clients, is to almost interview them in a sense to sort of make sure that they have the maturity of the understanding of what marketing can do, to make sure that I can actually make a difference in their world and they can see value. If they're looking for somebody who can do balloons and brochures or arts and crafts, then I'm definitely not the right person. And typically, the CEOs that are of that mindset aren't necessarily convinced that they need marketing. And that can also be a challenge as well, because most of these businesses do require marketing in one form or another, especially if they're trying to sort of grow their business. But their misconceptions of marketing is kind of sending them off on a bit of a tangent.
And you've kind of hit a nail on the head there, that sort of marketing maturity. In your opinion, in terms of the prospects, the companies you're speaking to, what level of business maturity do you think is the right place to bring on board a fractional? Is it early stage startups? Are they scale ups at a certain level? Is it established businesses? Where do you think that sort of de minimis point is, where the maturity of the business is at the right point to bring someone like a fractional CMO on board?
So I think bringing on a fractional CMO is good for startups and scale-ups alike. Personally, I'm more focusing on the scale-ups rather than the startups. In the startup space, I've seen a lot of potential clients come to me talking around sweat equity, in return for paying us actually our sort of fees. And I definitely don't want to sort of be in that space necessarily either. And I kind of find that the scale-ups have some of the kind of the infrastructure in place in order to sort of manage what the outputs of marketing will be. So my personal focus right now is definitely the scale-ups, but I think you could apply a fractional CMO to pretty much the entire business maturity, depending on where that company is in their journey.
And I think that brings me on nicely to my next question, Mark, is on this theme of maturity. So on one part of the telescope, you've got business maturity needing a fractional on board. On the other end of the telescope, you've got marketers, probably in corporate roles, senior marketers, they've been doing marketing for 15, 20 years, and they're probably contemplating a switch to this wonderful fractional world because it promises so many things. What advice would you give to other marketers who are thinking about the transition, but haven't quite decided whether it's the right choice for them or not?
Yeah, I think the key piece of advice I can say is find either another fractional CMO or a community of fractional CMOs or CXOs to go and chat to before you make that move. I think for some, the grass isn't necessarily always greener. I think if you're coming out, like I mentioned at the beginning, if you're coming out of a corporate and you've been there most of your career, the change to sort of move into a fractional role is quite considerable. You've got to have that entrepreneurial spirit. You've got to have a background in the areas that maybe you haven't been involved in: sales, finance, business strategy, and those other areas. And so I think that the thing is to make sure you do your research, understand what you're getting into, and also to be aware that it's not the same as getting a salary at the end of the month, every month, regardless of what you do. Depending on how you've structured your fractional business, it may be also that you don't necessarily get sort of paid for taking holidays or taking leave, whatever that might be, or taking sick leave. So again, I think a lot of people have that misconception that, yeah, it looks fantastic, it looks very rosy, but there are some trade-offs that we have to make as fractional CXOs as well. And having that experience, as I mentioned, in those other parts of business, I think are also quite critical. And sometimes people believe that they can actually do sales, and they kind of move into this sort of contracting or fractional space, and they're sitting there and they've built their website, they've built out their LinkedIn profile, and they're sitting there and it's absolute crickets, and nobody's coming to them for the businesses, and they can't quite work out how. So I think having that entrepreneurial spirit is critical, and probably having a community of people around you that can kind of give you advice and guidance, because a lot of these people that are coming into the fractional space are seasoned executives, and they're probably in the latter stages of their career. They're accomplished, and within their defined space within a corporate, they've achieved a lot, and they're very successful. But it's a very different play to coming into a fractional world. So I think understanding those differences and making sure that you're well prepared for that, and you've got a support network, is critical as well. If you think about when you're a corporate in a large organization, or even a smaller organization, you've got a group of people around you, the rest of the exco or the management team, and then suddenly you start your own fractional business, and it's you yourself and I sitting there, trying to drum up business, trying to deliver business, engage new clients. So it's a very different.
I totally concur with everything you said there, Mark. And I came to this journey. I think I was well prepared, but looking back, there's definitely things I would have done differently. I would have spent more time working on the ICP, developing the value proposition, and networking before I even decided to take the plunge. And it's only really since I launched have I come across these various communities across the world, which have been incredibly helpful, and various business coaches and mentors. And I think, my advice is, it would echo yours: speak to those who've been there, done it. Talk about the war stories. Talk about how did it feel when that revenue wasn't coming in, and how
Yes.
6 months in when the revenue didn't come in, how was your partner and relationship? If you're married or something, because that's one of the other things is if you're married or in a relationship, your partner has to buy into this work style as well. Because if you've got aspirations as a couple to, I don't know, put an extension on the house in the summer, or upgrade the car, or put the new kitchen in the house that you've always promised yourselves. If you have those plans when you're on your 6-figure corporate salary, that's great. It's all good to have those plans. But if you come into this portfolio work style, and if that revenue isn't replaced immediately, it can take several months, maybe years, to get back to that level. Some of those plans and aspirations are going to have to be put on ice, and that can sometimes put a bit of an unhealthy tension in the relationship. So, my partner Rose, she's been brilliant. She's been very supportive of everything, and when the income hasn't been there, it's been fine. But I think go into this with your eyes wide open, because there will be you'll think, especially marketers, you'll think you'll walk it, but actually, I think out of all the C-suite, marketers find it the hardest to transition, because it's just a mindset thing. I think with the other fractional leaders, they don't know marketing. They go and learn marketing. They learn the craft, and they learn from the bottom up. And I think with seasoned marketers, they forgot they've got teams to do all the grunt work for them. And all of a sudden, they've got to upskill again. They've got to dust off that sales book, get the shoes shined, and go and tread the leather and do the networking, do social selling on LinkedIn. And it's definitely a mindset thing. You need to be prepared for all of these new things that you probably weren't doing in your corporate role.
Absolutely, Paul. And if there's one other sort of piece of advice I could sort of give to everybody listening to this podcast, if they're thinking of moving into the fractional space, I discovered your season one podcast about sort of 4 weeks ago or so. And I pretty much listened to all of the episodes back to back, yourself and Dan Walter. And there was topics that you guys discussed on season one that I thought, yeah, okay, I know this. And I got to the end of the episode, and I thought, geez, okay, I've actually learned something new from these guys. So I think the key thing as well, especially because most of these fractional CXOs are seasoned executives, just because you're that stage of your career doesn't mean you know everything. And I think to your point as well, in terms of dusting off some of the skills that we've learned when we were younger, when we had to kind of roll up our sleeves and get stuck in, there's a whole bunch of things that we can continuously learn from the likes of your podcast and other communities around how to kind of make this transition and how to kind of just sharpen the saw and actually sort of keep ourselves current to benefit our customers as well.
Yeah, thank you for the plug. That's a completely unprompted plug, by the way. So thank you for that. But
Absolutely,
you're right. But there are, as this fractional movement is gaining momentum, there's lots of great resources out there. Yes, we've got this podcast. There's many others out there as well. But there's also some really good communities emerging now. Fractionals United is a really strong global community. I think there's over 10,000 fractional leaders, not just marketers. It's across the C-suite, which is a great place to dip your toe in and just find people doing what you do. And I'd also think it's great speaking to other fractionals that are not your discipline. Speak to some fractional CFOs or CTOs, because again, you'll get just a slightly different perspective, which can really shape your approach to tackling the market, I guess. So Marc, fractional leadership, is it here to stay? Where's it going to be in 5 years' time, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, let's face it. I mean, the gig economy has been around for the last 15 years or so, and in its broadest terms, fractional work kind of fits into that sort of gig economy category in a sense. So, I definitely think it's going to be here to stay. I think especially after the pandemic, more people kind of started to sort of look at the gig economy in terms of how they could actually move out of their corporate jobs and find different ways of actually sort of earning a living. And I think here in South Africa, even though it's very new, the fractional concept, just in the last 4 months, I've connected with a number of different fractional CXOs across different domains of expertise. So I really do believe that there's an advantage in terms of growing this business. The flexibility, I think, for many clients is clear to see. So I think it's got a good opportunity to sort of grow. And I think the market's receiving it well at the moment.
I think you mentioned earlier, we're certainly behind the US in terms of traction and understanding of the model. But you're starting to see more job adverts now on LinkedIn looking for a fractional. There's more column inches in the trade press about the fractional model as well. So it's definitely getting momentum. I think you're right. It is here to stay. And I think there'll be a lot of business leaders at board level saying, why didn't we do this 20 years ago? And I think 20 years ago, we didn't have the digital collaboration that we have today. So just doing this podcast, we're, I don't know how many thousand miles apart, 6,000 miles or whatever it is. But this real-time sort of globalization, it's really, really simple to do now. And I think particularly as this is a service we offer, it's expertise. This expertise as a service is it's very approachable now, and it's very easy to access. And I think you don't have to physically be in someone's office space to deliver this expertise. You can do it from your bedroom if you really want to, or your home office, or anywhere globally.
Absolutely, Paul. And it's definitely kind of skills as a service, isn't it, really? It's evolved into that. And I think, as more and more people kind of start to sort of focus and niche into their particular skills as a service domain, that's where I think the real value comes out.
Absolutely. Marc, before we close, would you like to say a few words about what you're doing with your own practice, Hedley Sydney?
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. So I think one of the things that I've learned in the last 4 months, and definitely through, your podcast and my other research, is to be quite niched in terms of, where I'm focusing. So right now I'm focusing on South African businesses, because that's the sort of domain that I've known for the last 16 years. I'm also very much focused around SMEs, and it's B2B SMEs in the tech services space, companies that are looking to sort of scale. And really that's the offering that I'm making right now. A lot of these businesses in that SME space lack a lot of marketing strategy. So they've got a business strategy, but they're lacking the marketing strategy that sort of backs the business strategy that they've got, and then implementing marketing plans to drive that strategy forward. And so that's what I'm engaging my clients with at the moment, doing a lot of go-to-market work, devising their products and offers they want to take to market, the messaging, and then the campaigns that sort of follow as a result of that. So that's kind of where I'm focusing at the moment. There's a significant amount of traction for me at the moment. There's quite a lot of clients that I think are in need of that. But I think as we find with this fractional business, it could evolve in 6 months to a year's time. But that's my focus at the moment, and that's what I'm helping customers succeed in that space.
Fantastic. So if anyone's listening, any UK-based businesses wanting to relocate or open up in South Africa, Marc's your man.
Absolutely.
And that's probably a good point to close the show. So if you've been listening or watching this episode, I hope you found value from the discussion and you've been inspired by Marc's story. In the next episode, I'll be speaking to another fractional leader from another part of the world, so stay tuned for that one. Marc, thank you again for giving up your time to share your perspectives. I've really enjoyed listening to you, and I wish you the very best of luck with your future journey.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me, and wishing you the best with your continued podcast.